Kia ora koutou PSA members, Atheling Rose tōku ingoa, convener of the PSA lead team for MSD. Joining me presenting today is
Lauren Harrigan, PSA organiser based in Wellington.
Welcome to the PSA Pay and Progression Proposal, a presentation to PSA members in MSD for February 2021. We are going to quickly do some introductions and turn our cameras off and stuff because you don't need to see us now. Obviously, I have introduced myself, convener of the PSA lead team, have been heavily involved in the activities that have led up to this presentation and the work that has been done between PSA and MSD, and Lauren, who has introduced herself as well. So, the purpose of this meeting is to remind you about previous meetings. So we had the pre-bargaining sessions in August, September, and the pre-bargaining sessions in December last year. And as an outcome of bargaining in 2018 for both National Office Collective Agreement and the Service Delivery Collective Agreement between PSA and MSD, was a work program to redesign the remuneration framework. The proposal that we're going to talk about today is made up of two frameworks. One is a capability and development framework known as Te Arapiki, which is translated to as Pathway Ahead, and a pay framework. And the other thing that we will be talking about is the transition plan to get from where we are today to the future state of our remuneration framework. The work has actually been completed. It did take longer than we intended, than any of us even predicted it could take, and there have been some bumps along the way to get to this point. The system will be implemented if it is voted on by both groups of PSA members in MSD, that's Service Delivery and National Office Ministry of Youth Development. The vote will occur immediately prior to bargaining. That means that as soon as this is done, we will go straight into the bargaining process. This presentation will be explaining the system, how it will work, and also how the vote process will work. So, as noted, we've got the two frameworks and the transition plan to cover. A brief recap of where we came from and why we took it into bargaining in 2018 is that the remuneration ranges for service delivery are too low, and for National Office, the position and range doesn't really mean anything. The proposed framework takes the 40 current pay bands across those two collective agreements down to 8, and it provides for step-based progression throughout your band. The new system is designed to encourage fair recognition of our people. It's simple, flexible, and transparent, supports the direction of our organisation, and is affordable, evidence-based, and consistent.
If agreed, the framework will apply to all staff in roles under coverage of the National Office and Service Delivery Collective Agreements, but only PSA members get to have a vote in the ratification process. There's a separate piece of work planned for later in the year around a pay and progression system for the Manager and Senior Specialists Collective Agreement.
The PSA lead team has recommended that our members accept this proposal, because we believe it is a solid basis for a good system, whilst improvements and band increases can continue to be made in future bargaining, particularly in light of current pay restraint economic uncertainty. This is a good system and it's a good place to start from. The voting period will run from the 8th of March through to the 19th of March. It will be done by an electronic vote, which you individually will be sent a link to be able to vote. What we need you to do is to make sure that we have your correct details in My PSA and to get your colleagues to join PSA. Now is a really good time to join. If they've been thinking about it for a while and haven't quite signed up, get them to do so. It means they get to have their say. And also, just again, reminding you that we are going straight into bargaining after this process has been completed.
We know it's something that is of really high interest to our members. Te Arapiki translates as the pathway ahead, and it will replace the current systems of PDA/the transitional system of mahitahi for service delivery and the performance system of On Track for National Office. The purpose of it is that it moves away from performance and brings in a focus on capability and development. It retains a minimal link with pay progression. So as part of an annual cycle on the 1st of October each year, pay progression will be assumed, except for the cases of unsatisfactory performance and for members opting out of participating in Te Arapiki. We expect those to be very rare exceptions, but the other really important point here is that the feedback and development, the focus on capability and developing people is not a once a year conversation. It is something that needs to be on a continuous basis throughout the year. This means there are no annual ratings, and it supports MSD's direction with a strengths-based approach. Managers providing regular feedback and support to motivate employees to continue developing and to continue to talk about and realign their objectives. The two exceptions where pay progression can be deferred is, as I said, if a member, the employee, chooses to opt out of participating in Te Arapiki. So it's not about if your manager doesn't fulfill their side of this framework, and where there is formal notification of unsatisfactory performance. So very similarly to mahitahi, this must be notified in writing and that it may affect progression. There must be a clear plan to address these issues, and once they are resolved, progression occurs at that point, so you don't wait another year to receive it. The pay system, the part we know you've been waiting for. So previously we've talked about the reduction to 8 consistent pay bands across the organisation and the zones within those bands that reflect your development in a role as you progress. Each band has 13 steps. There's 4 in the first zone, 5 in the second, and 4 in the third. The anchor point is step number 5, which is at the start of zone 2. And you progress annually between those steps on the 1st of October each year. Moving between bands themselves is by appointment to a different role, to a higher banded role within the organisation. And the dollar increases to those bands is still set by collective bargaining. That anchor point is an important point in the visuals you're about to see, because it's the value that's linked to market, initially the core government market median, and it's the value that will agree through future bargaining. It's also really important for when staff are recruited to ensure people are appointed at equitable steps, and if a manager wants to appoint a new staff member at or above that anchor point, there will be an additional level of sign-off required. Final caveat before we actually move on to the visuals is that the next few slides are about the collective impacts of this proposal. If you need we know everyone will want to see the individual impacts. There will be a calculator available, or there is a calculator available on Google for you to see a guide as to how this proposal might affect you personally. The reason it's a guide is because it's a simplified tool that can't cater for every circumstance, such as where someone works part-time or is receiving a higher duties allowance, etc. And we recommend you sit down and have a conversation with your manager if you want some more info about that type of circumstance. So this table shows how the bands in the 2 current systems are proposed to map across to the proposed new framework. As you can see, for service delivery, it's relatively straightforward. There are currently 8 bands labelled A to H, and they will map across to 8 bands labelled 1 to 8. For National Office, it's a little bit more complex in that there is a large number of bands across different clusters, including corporate, policy, IT, and economist. And so this shows where they would map across to if this proposed framework is implemented. This visual shows you how the 8 bands relate to each other in terms of their dollar values. So this system is also intended to support career progression, the ability to move between roles, and therefore bands within the ministry as well. There is a table available on Google that shows the dollars beside every step in each of the 8 bands. That was just a little bit hard to reproduce in a PowerPoint in a way you'd be able to read it. So do encourage you to go and have a look. But you will see in the details that the increases to bands in service delivery in particular are quite significant, and at the smallest are 5%. And this visual may be slightly familiar from previous members' meetings. So this shows you the steps within the bands. The thing that is different from previous visuals here is you'll see there are steps within that third zone, the enhancing contribution zone. As we've said, you progress annually between each of those steps and progression is assumed. The anchor point there at step 5, just call out the development program zone down the bottom is an exception zone. It will only be used for specific programs, for example, graduate programs or cadetships. It cannot be applied to staff employed through normal recruitment processes, and so we generally don't include it when we talk about the 3 core zones. So the first of those 3 core zones is the growing capability zone, which is about when you are new and growing the capability into the role that you are in. And then the anchor point at the bottom of that second zone, growing expertise, which is about when you are developing, becoming an expert in your role as well. And then the third zone, enhancing contribution, is recognizing that you have been in the role and that you may be making additional contributions through activities beyond the role requirements itself, such as supporting other colleagues in the workplace or taking on other responsibilities. Progression through all 3 zones is on that assumed and annual basis. The third component of the proposal that members are voting on is the transition plan, how members will move from the current systems to the proposed, or to the pay system in particular. Again, this is about collective impacts, so encourage you to go and have a look at how it will work individually for you. On this next slide, you will see the table that sets out the general rules for how people will transition based on current position and range to a step in the new bands. Transition is planned for June 2021. The first pay day in which you'll see the new rates applied is the pay run of 23rd of June. And then there will be the first round of progression-based increases occurring on the 1st of October 2021. There are 2 exceptions to this rule table. A couple of them are listed on the next page based on the pay bands roles are currently in. And the other exception is where an individual's current salary is already equal to or greater than the dollar value of their new step. But the most important thing to call out here is that no individual salary will decrease as a result of implementing this proposal. In scenarios where your existing salary is equal to or higher than the new step this table provides for, you will come across on your current salary, and your increase to the next step in June will be the difference between your current salary and that step. So no one will be paid less at transition under this proposal. So the exceptions are in service delivery band B and service delivery band C. This is because when we were modelling the impacts of this proposal, because of the change to progression date, as well as the differing changes to the values of the bands, these groups could potentially have been left behind for a period of time under the proposed system. So if you are on 95, 100 or 105% of service delivery band B, you will transition across to a step higher than the table on the previous slide provided for. And if you are on 95% of service delivery band C, same thing, you will transition to step 3 rather than step 2.
And of course, we know that in order for everybody to stay ahead over time, we need to bargain for increases for the bands, and we'll be going into bargaining straight after the conclusion of this process.
Where can you get more information? Thanks, Lauren, for covering all of that earlier detail. There's a lot there that is hard to take in one go. So we do suggest that you keep going back to Dougal and look at the information that is held there, and that you look at the PSA's website section for MSD members, which is in the link as shown on screen. You can go to the PSA website and put in social development and get that same page. Remember, there is a salary calculator on Dougal to give you a guide to how the proposal could affect you personally. And it's really important that even when you've looked at Dougal, the PSA website, and gone through that calculator, that if you still have questions, you can go and talk to your manager or a delegate in the first instance, and they can help walk you through the detail that's held in those places. If the answer isn't as easy to get, they can email, a manager can email Ask HR through a special channel that is available for this purpose, or the delegate can ask PSA directly through the channel that we have available there. It's really important that you discuss everything that's in the three-part proposal, because the really important step follows up on the next screen. Make sure you vote. Our timeframes for voting, as said earlier, will be between the 8th of March and the 19th of March, and we will be announcing the results on the 22nd of March. If this is ratified, it will be implemented from 10 June, and you'll see your new pay rates in the pay run that will be made on the 23rd of June. Only PSA members get to vote, and they will be voting by an electronic secret ballot. Each person will be getting an individual link via email to cast their vote. We want to make sure that you go into your My PSA and make sure that your email address and email preference, whether it goes to your personal or your work email address, is up to date. You also can call the PSA's Organising Centre on 0508 for PSA, that's 0508 367 772, to update that detail if you don't have access to My PSA. And this way you'll make sure that you get your voting link. So thank you very much for attending and taking part in this session today. If you do have any questions, please first talk to your delegate or manager. And if you can't get the answer that you need, or they can't give you the answer straight away, they will follow the correct process to go through and get further information and advice. Thank you very much once again. Ka kite anō.
Ka kite.